Hello, church. It's Pastor Chris here to bring you today's daily fellowship video. And I'm in my kitchen with my cup of coffee here, just reading the scripture to continue where we've been the past few weeks. And if you haven't watched the Friday daily fellowship devotional videos, I encourage you, pause the video now, go back and rewatch those, and you'll kind of catch up where we are. But I want to pick up where we left off. And this is in verse 17 of 2 Kings chapter 5. It says, "If you will not," said Naaman, "please let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry. For your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to any other god but the Lord." What has happened right before this passage is Naaman has been this guy. He had leprosy, and we've been talking about this idea. He was this great, powerful guy. He got leprosy, and then he goes into the land of Israel and encounters the prophet Elisha, and through a roundabout way eventually ends up being healed of his leprosy and ends up experiencing full restoration, not only of his body, but in his spirit as well. And so what happens? Naaman then wants to reward Elisha for this healing, and Elisha rejects it. He says, "No, you don't have to pay me anything." But then Naaman says, "All right, if I can't give you anything, then allow me to take as much dirt as my mules can carry back to the land that I come from, so that I may never worship any other god or idol again." What is Naaman doing? Naaman has had this, what you could call, a mountaintop experience with God. He has encountered the real living presence of God. And yet he realizes he's going to have to go back to the everyday patterns of life. And sometimes those everyday patterns are mundane, and sometimes those everyday patterns feel like God isn't there. And so what does he do? He wants to take this dirt back with him to where he is from, so that he can have this reminder and this remembrance of this experience he's had with God. How many of us need to remember a time in which we've encountered the real living presence of God? There's so much crazy stuff going on in our world today, and oftentimes it seems like, man, surely God isn't even around to see what all is happening. It feels like God is so distant sometimes. But how many of us need to remember the incredible encounters that we have had with God? How many of us need to be like Naaman and have this tangible reminder that God has in fact encountered us, that we have in fact experienced the healing and reconciliation of the living God? So what do we need to remember? What encounter with God do we need to remember? Because like Naaman, sometimes we have these mountaintop experiences, and then we dive back into the regular old mundane aspects of life. But I believe that God is calling us constantly throughout Scripture to remember what He has done for us, to remember the times in which we have encountered God, and allow those moments to enrich our worship and our praise and our faith in the everyday mundane moments that aren't on the mountaintop. So church, I hope as we go into this weekend, as we go through this season of life that is full of chaos, my hope and my prayer for you is that you would remember the times in which you have encountered the real presence of the living God. You are loved and you are prayed for.